Good afternoon. Today is Wednesday, the 4th of February, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. Delighted to have Ben Rubin with me in the studio. And we'll just say pretty bad day here in Plymouth. You might be able to see it in the background, but we've got rain and wind howling and lashing on the seafront. But we're very warm in the UK Column studio today, so that is good. Now, we have very exciting news today. This will be an extended, slightly extended UK Column News, because, of course, we've got part of our team in China, which we're absolutely delighted. We've only been able to do that with the huge support that the UK Column is getting from all its members and supporters. So lots of exciting things happening. But we decided that we will kick off in just a moment with the Epstein story, because it represents so much. It tells us so much about not only high-level politics, but the high-level state and control inside it. We'll be making a report from ChongQing in central China, which is where Mike Robinson and Charles Malet and some of the team are at this very moment. Charles will be giving us a report, taking us from matters around DEFRA to conscription. If that sounds pretty extraordinary, it is, so stay posted for that. Ben, you're going to be having a look at matters around national emergency here in UK. Mike Robinson will be talking about digital ID. We'll be having a look at links between Full Fact and GCHQ. Yes, that's what I said. And Ben is also going to be having a look at policy profession, the means by which local council policies are being captured by the corporates, really, Ben.
Not just local councils, the whole stack of the civil service.
Yeah. And if that's not enough, we'll end off with a little look at what the King has or has not been doing. So let's kick off with Epstein. And what's your focus, Ben?
Yes. Well, we're going to start with a short video clip, actually, not about Epstein, but about our dear Prime Minister speaking this time last year in Washington, D.C., in the first few weeks of the second Trump administration.
Already I can feel there's a real buzz around Washington right now. You can sense that there's a new leader in town, that he's a true one-off, a pioneer in business and in politics. Many people love him. Others love to hate him. But to us, he's just Peter. And Peter is the right person to help us work with President Trump and to take this special relationship from...
Well, there we are. Such a nice man, Peter.
That was actually quite good from Starmer. But, that was...
Steady.
Well, it was probably scripted, but kind of funny, but also hideous at the same time, right? Because he's talking about Peter Mandelson. Mandelson, who'd already had to resign twice and then subsequently had to resign again because of his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, a relationship that Starmer must have known about while he was making that speech, right? And we've seen so much more of this. Readers of the Daily Mail, where I got this from, will have been treated to the sight of Mandelson's underwear over the past couple of days. This is just one more example that we've seen coming from the Epstein files, this time with a young lady, no less. And there are more messages coming out by the day. And I do have to ask, Brian, at what point do you think Starmer might think about tendering his resignation because of this?
I think that won't happen, Ben, until sufficient pressure comes on him. And as we're going to see in today's news, the whole state is geared up to make sure pressure doesn't come on him. But let's wait and see.
It's extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. And in fact, these are coming out by the day. I was just on X before we came on air, and I'd seen some messages from Mandelson to Epstein on the day that Epstein was released from prison for child sexual abuse crimes. congratulating him on his Freedom Day and asking him what he was going to be getting up to.
Yeah.
Absolutely extraordinary. And then this, yesterday, which is from Mandelson to Epstein, notifying him of internal recommendations from inside number 10 about the need to sell national assets to pay down government debt. This was an internal government email from Gordon Brown's team back in 2009 telling him that the UK needed to sell national assets. Mandelson has forwarded this to Epstein, and Epstein has replied saying, what saleable assets? Because obviously he's in the business of buying up those kinds of assets. And my question, another question for you then, is that treasonous?
It's a really good question, because these people are clearly not working in the best interest of the country, and they're certainly not working within law. And if they're putting the nation state at risk, that in my book would be treason. But of course, mainstream media is not going to even suggest that is the case. But we've put it as a question, and I think it's a reasonable question.
I think it certainly is. Now, we're going to be talking about the Epstein files for, I would imagine, years, maybe decades to come, maybe longer, to be honest with you. Just a couple more examples that really jumped out at me from the most recent tranche that have come out over the past few days. One was this. This is Noam Chomsky with Epstein and unnamed individual in the centre there. These two gentlemen very close, and this tells me a lot, I think, about the radical left, Chomsky being one of the most vocal left-wing polemicists, theorists over the past several decades, and this is the kind of relationship that he's happy to cultivate. And then finally, for me on this section, is this one, the fact that Epstein was a Rothschild agent. He represented the Rothschild family. He was paid $25 million to do so that we know of, right? So that's just one transaction that we've seen. And you can see here, part of the advice that he was delivering to them was that the upheaval in Ukraine back in 2014 would provide many opportunities. Many. And I think that probably tells us quite a bit about what's happening in Ukraine today.
Opportunities that are now the slaughter of hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians, hundreds of thousands of Russians slaughtered while the assets are stripped. But that's an opportunity in an email. It's quite disgusting, Ben. Well, let's just follow it through. And perhaps unusually for me, I'm going to pop up on screen that a while ago, back in December, but presumably this work had been going on for several months, the BBC was doing some investigation. And here's the headline: Epstein's UK flights had alleged British abuse victims on board. And there was a BBC journalist team working on this. I'm only going to take a little bit out of it, but they, amongst other things, they did bring up in the article that they'd looked at the number of flights connected to Epstein, which had continued to fly to the UK after his conviction. And you can see there on the left, it's saying there were 15 UK flights after Epstein's release from prison in 2009. And then on the right is a segment out of the flight logs. And the key thing is that passengers are normally meticulously recorded by name in case there is an air accident. But in the case of Epstein's logs, names were either not recorded or there was only initials so that people couldn't be identified. But you'll notice that information has been redacted by the BBC in relation to these other alleged victims. Now, in the article, there's a quote from Sigrid McCrawley, who was one of the lawyers involved with Epstein's victims. And she said the British authorities have not taken a closer look at those flights, at where he was at, who he was seeing at those moments, and who was with him on those planes, and conducted a full investigation. There's no full British investigation which has been conducted. And then if we have a look at Will Dahlgreen, who was one of the more senior reporters who were looking into these flights, he said that 2 months ago, the BBC sent the Metropolitan Police, which has previously examined allegations about Epstein's activities in Britain, publicly available information about the flights, about UK flights with suspected trafficking victims on board. Later, we sent the Met a detailed list of questions about whether it would investigate evidence of possible British victims of Epstein trafficked in and out of UK. The Met did not respond to our questions. So the BBC team doing their job here, and what happens? The Met doesn't respond. He went on to say that on Saturday, the Met released a broader statement saying that it had not received any additional, can we just pop that one back on screen, please? Thank you. Had not received any additional evidence that would support reopening the investigation into Epstein and Maxwell's trafficking activities in the UK. And let's bring up the key person at the time, Cressida Dick, the Met police commissioner. She was quoted as saying that she'd asked her team to have another look at the Guthrie material, but it went on, the Met review is complete, but we will liaise with other law enforcement agencies who lead the investigations into matters related to Jeffrey Epstein. So basically no full investigation and nothing to see, according to the Met Police. This is all par for the course. Let's just pop Cressida Dick on screen and just hear what she was up to. She couldn't investigate the abuse of women and most likely children on a substantial scale. No, she was doing something else. Let's hear what she was up to.
I have absolutely no intention of going, and I believe that I am, and have been actually, for the last 5 years, leading a real transformation in the Met.
So there we are, a real transformation in the Met, more woke agenda to the extent the Met cannot or won't do its job when it comes to protecting the British public from paedophiles in positions of immense power. No surprise then that the lawyer, if we pop it back on screen, Sigrid Macaulay, had this to say: the message the Met is sending to victims is that if you come to law enforcement and this is a powerful person you're reporting on, it will not get investigated. And I think, Ben, she absolutely sums up the situation here. So the BBC focusing as per the decision, presumably of the editorial team, on the froth around Epstein. Meanwhile, the investigation their own team has quite rightly started is squashed. So who's making these decisions inside the BBC?
It's a very good question. So, Cressida Dick, was she common purpose?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Through and through.
Right. Okay, and it has been pointed out, someone just mentioned it in the chat box there, but I've seen a bit of discussion about this online, is that actually a lot of what we're seeing coming out, although it is revelatory in a certain sense, a lot of the people that are being hung out to dry in these new files that are coming out are essentially out of the they're not going to have to face any kind of democratic scrutiny. There's no real implications for them at a personal level. It's very unlikely that Mandelson or Bill Clinton or certainly Blair or anyone like that is actually going to be arrested because of this. And actually, the people who are we can potentially hold to account are not in the crosshairs here.
I think they're very worried people, but they're not in the crosshairs yet, and they won't be until the appropriate authorities, so that includes the Met, includes our security services, the FBI and CIA, actually take the correct action to prosecute this case. And that hasn't happened yet because it involves many people in very powerful positions. Now, we have to leave that there, but let's move on to the subject of the UK columns team's reports from China. We're going to show you in just a few seconds a clip of ChongQing in central China, where Mike and Charles and the team are. But we want to say to our audience, this has only been possible due to the huge support that we've had from our wider supporters. And this allows UK column, and we're extremely proud of this, to start reporting from in-country. So instead of reporting on information which is web-based, we're going to be able to increase the strength of the UK column in actually understanding what is happening on the ground, what governments say, and what people in a nation state have to say. And I'll just remind our team that Patrick Henningsen has done excellent reporting. He's been into Syria, he's been into Russia, he's been into the troubled zone in Donbass and quite close to the area of the war with Ukraine. So that was really excellent. And of course, Vanessa Beeley putting herself at great risk to report from within Syria and more latterly being in a new home in Lebanon. So this has been part of the power of UK Column. We're extremely proud that we've got the capability to do this. We're going to expand it, but today we've got some reports coming from inside China. So let's just have a look at a little minute clip giving us a feel for ChongQing, where Mike Robinson and Charles Malet and team are at the moment.
This is absolutely priceless. Look at just everybody doing exactly the same thing. It's more of a spectacle, the train going through the building or everyone filming it. Yes, exactly, yeah.
So a short clip there just to give you a taster. That's a very big city. It's by the Yangtze River at this time of year. Quite a lot of fog. It's not smog that you can possibly see in the background. It's fog connected with the temperature of the river and the surrounding area. And that little clip was taken just outside the Liziba, if I've pronounced that correctly, metro station. And I believe it's also, that area is also connected with some form of memorial to do with the war between China and Japan. So there are people on the streets, but let's now switch to Charles Malet. We've got the first of two clips that Charles made on location, but he's focusing back in on matters very pertinent to the UK. Let's hear what he had to say.
Good afternoon all. Now, the focus of the report for today is going to be on DEFRA, the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, and in particular the documents that they've put out recently, and one of considerable note because it escalates the level of fear-mongering to, I would contend, somewhere that we haven't seen before. And you might like to think of it as being the culmination of 5 years of shaping operations through the intertwined narratives of the COVID emergency, or at least so we were told, the conflict in Ukraine, and the enduring problem as it's presented of climate change. And all of these things have been brought together in order to deliver the idea that food and national security are inextricably linked and it affects you. So we'll look at the document in some detail because it really does deserve terrific scrutiny, both in terms of its alarmism, but also the consequences or perhaps the considerations that drop out of it. Here it is on screen now: global biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse and national security. So in order to make sense of it, we'll just have a look at the definitions, and they make a distinction between ecosystem degradation and collapse. Now, degradation is regarded as a long-term reduction in an ecosystem's structure, functionality or capacity to provide benefits to people, and collapse is a reference to a critical threshold beyond which an ecosystem is potentially irreversibly changed and can no longer maintain essential structure or function. So the premise of this document is that they've made 7 key judgments, obviously too small for you to read on the screen there. So I'll just go through 3 of the perhaps most pertinent. And What they start with is the assumption that global ecosystem degradation and collapse threaten UK national security and prosperity. So straight away, making the connection between what is seen and felt on the ground in the United Kingdom and the rest of the world. The world is already experiencing impacts, including crop failures, intensified natural disasters, and infectious disease outbreaks. Of course, there are now certain threats will increase with degradation and intensify with collapse. Without major intervention to reverse the current trend, this is likely to continue to 2050 and beyond. Now, this is strong language, and in terms of their confidence in this judgment, they are giving that a high rating. So therefore, they think that there is a very high probability of their being correct on this particular judgment. Now, to look at the next one, critical ecosystems that support major global food production areas and impact global climate, water and weather cycles are the most important for UK national security. So again, this focus or the link being made between the global food production and the state of national security in the United Kingdom. Severe degradation or collapse of these would highly likely result in water insecurity, severely reduced crop yields, a global reduction in arable land, fisheries collapse, changes to global weather patterns, release of trapped carbon exacerbating climate change, novel zoonotic diseases, and loss of pharmaceutical resources. Now, we've seen a lot of this being mentioned in certain respects before, but to have it all combined in such a format is really a new departure. And they go on to reinforce this point about global and local being connected by saying the Amazon rainforest, Congo rainforest, boreal forests, the Himalayas and Southeast Asia's coral reefs and mangroves are particularly significant for the UK. So from a worldwide perspective, we are all in it together. And again, they give this a high rating. They think there is a high likelihood that they are correct in their assumption making this judgment. The last one we're going to have a quick look at is that without significant increases in UK food system and supply chain resilience, it is unlikely the UK would be able to maintain food security if ecosystem collapse drives geopolitical competition for food. Again, linking local and worldwide. The UK relies on imports for a proportion of both food and fertiliser and cannot currently produce enough food to feed its population based on current diets. Current diets, a critical part there, pointing the focus back at the individual and in effect setting up what will come as the answer. Countries best placed to adapt are those that invest in ecosystem protection and restoration and resilient and efficient food systems. And they highlight here that they think there's a moderate chance that this is on the button. But what they've introduced there, of course, is this idea that the responsibility for this is to be borne on the individual. And that is absolutely something that is further reinforced by some of the graphics here, showing here how the degrading ecosystems lead through to physical and biological impacts, and then of course intertwining the idea that human security risks and international security risks are linked. But the critical phrase that is brought out here in the first paragraph below this graph is that nature is a foundation of national security. And again, another sort of scaremongering graph with a trend showing how biodiversity is decreasing and what will happen if we don't do anything. And then if you're unable to see the graph, there is of course the split, or at least the fork, where we're projecting via modelling, of course, what it is that could be done if we were to get a grip and change this. And again, here we see yet more graphics reinforcing the point, particularly around climate change and the fact that we are responsible for this, and therefore it is beholden upon us as individuals to do something about it. Now, if you're in any doubt as to the tactics employed in this and whether or not it is designed to be a moderate and reasonably worded document or not, this might clarify it for you. There is a paragraph here qualifying the loss of biodiversity, and they say the rate of extinction is tens to hundreds of times higher than the average over the past 10 million years. It suggests that a sixth mass extinction may be underway. Now, they don't qualify that by saying whether they consider that to be across all species, including human beings, but the inference there is absolutely that if you, as an individual, do not do something about this, then you, as an individual, will suffer the consequences. again, you might be wondering where this has come from, and it says rather opaquely it's been developed by analysts and experts across His Majesty's government. It supports long-term resilience planning, and by publishing this assessment, we are highlighting the opportunities for innovation, green finance and global partnerships that can drive growth while safeguarding the ecosystem that underpin our collective security and prosperity. So the key things which I've highlighted to fall out of this, of course, are talking about the opportunities for what are going to be public-private partnerships, and that is where you will find that your collective security is guaranteed, and they are without doubt teeing up the situation for the suggestion that there must be some sort of a national sacrifice which is to be met by the individual. And this is why I prefix this by talking about the intertwined narratives of the supposed COVID pandemic, the crisis or the conflict in Ukraine, and indeed climate change. Now, this is pointing in several different directions, I might say, but all along the same theme.
I had the opportunity to see that prior to the news. Ben, you haven't. What was your take on it?
Money and power. That's what it's about, Brian. It's all about money and power, power and money. Consolidation of power through these new technological systems and concentration of wealth, because we all have to pay for it. And it's public-private marketplace, meets the technical definition of fascism. And that's what they're driving us into.
Drive us into it by the use of absolutely a brutal attack on people's minds in the UK. So very, very pertinent report. And we do need to see what is being said, because these are the policies destroying UK from the inside. Let's go back to Charles Malet and just hear what he said in the ending part of that segment.
What we're going to look at now is who's going to benefit, and referenced even in the document is the push towards nature recovery, 30 by 30, 30% of nature recovery, and land not being used for producing food critically by the year 2030. So already a raft of contradictions. This here, the Sustainable Markets Initiative and the Terra Carta, owned of course by King Charles III, and just as an illustration of how a public-private partnership does in fact manifest, a small example taken from the DEFRA website, their animal disease monitoring page, which has just been updated to reflect the fact that Newcastle disease, something that is said to afflict poultry, has been on the rise. And here's a document, admittedly not from the United Kingdom, but from a project in East Africa, and very clearly there is the partnership between the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the UK government, and that is absolutely the theme of things to come. So the individual is going to be told that for their safety, for their convenience, for the national security, in other words, the collective effort, they are to further the interests of the corporations and so-called philanthropists in order to protect and preserve our future. Now, again, in terms of judging whether there's any sincerity to this, we'll look at another press release saying that the UK's first ever plan to tackle forever chemicals is now underway, specifically referring to the PFAS category, which is per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. Now, what is important to note here is that one of the most widely applied chemicals in the food production process is, of course, glyphosate, the herbicide, which, whilst not regarded as a forever chemical because it doesn't fit into that neat category, is, of course, destructive to very much of the environment, in particular water and aquatic life, and yet it doesn't fall into this category and therefore will not receive any of that kind of attention. And also sodium chloride, sodium chlorate, which is used again in food hygiene, and because it's considered to be a safe part of making food hygienic, its use over and above the maximum residue limit is of course ignored. The other thing to point out is that there's now an interim chair appointed at the Office for Environmental Protection. You'd think that certainly they would have their ducks in a row, but Julie Hill has had to take over in what looks like fairly short order. She was a non-executive director and notably previously a board member of the Eden Project. So on the one hand, whilst the government is intending to set out that there is a plan for this, it doesn't look very much like there's much sincerity to this, or indeed that there are mechanisms by which the path can be ventured upon in a coherent way just yet. Where has this come from? Well, from many strands which have absolutely been discussed on the UK column over the past couple of years, the National Preparedness Commission having a key role there, sowing the seeds of doubt in the minds of people that we are in any way able to deal with a shock to the system. Again, a graphic I've shown several times over the last few months, and all the various schemes by which we are given the idea that we must have a whole of society response to the various emergencies that are said to beset us, at least in the future. The critical two there at the right-hand side being the National Security Strategy and the Strategic Defence Review. All those documents came out last year, and it might be said that they point very, very strongly to the idea of conscription. And so this is, in effect, a step further, making this connection between not just food and national security, but between your responsibility for the production of food in such a way that national security can be guaranteed. And it's looking very much like, with certainly conscription at the end there, possibly not in actual fact people being signed up for military service necessarily, but the adoption of a whole of society approach, and that the national interest is at stake. And this is why the COVID narrative, the COVID policy is so indicative of what looks like it is going to be coming down the track now. And the most obvious thing that I would say this points towards is the use of digital identity in order to be able to control and enforce the system that will push forward for the idea of national security at all costs. Now, there's an irony in reporting this from China, of course, because China in the mainstream context, certainly in the United Kingdom, is always presented as a threat to the United Kingdom, and yet it's very clear when one reads between the lines of a document like this that in actual fact all of these supposed problems and threats are absolutely a problem of the making of policy, and indeed the connections between governments and corporations from within the United Kingdom, and indeed influences from elsewhere.
Well, there we are. A long but very, very important report from Charles, and his final point, I think, absolutely key, that
yes,
this agenda being brewed and fermented and spread within the United Kingdom, and this is the key point for our audience, this has got to be dealt with before we can stop problems outside the country and move on to stopping some of these horrific wars overseas. It's
Absolutely.
Understanding. Now, you're on the subject of the National Emergency Briefing, Ben.
Yes, more emergencies. And actually, just to echo your thoughts on that final point, it was a great report from Charles. But my view is that if the Anglo-American establishment are telling you that someone is your enemy, then they're probably not, and you should go and find out more. Right? I'll just leave it there. But the emergency briefing and terror, ultimately, that we're being subjected to on a daily basis is going to continue to ramp up. Charles has just talked about some of the policies that have been put in place over the past 12 months. And at the end of last year, I talked about this event at Westminster Hall, the National Emergency Briefing, suitably dramatic, black and white. Let's just play a little clip to remind ourselves of what was on the agenda.
The biggest concern is that we're facing the potential of an ungovernable state unless government takes this seriously.
So I'm often asked, could these European-style megafloods happen here? The honest answer is yes.
We're running an increasing risk of these tipping points, including this critical one for the UK. In London, it's minus 20 degrees C and 3 frozen months of the year. And in Edinburgh, it's minus 30 degrees C and 5.5 frozen months of the year.
And I'm talking about the increasing pressure on global food supplies in the face of accelerating climate change and nature loss. And when families can't afford to feed their children, societies break down. We see this all the time.
I'm 63. I may not have that much longer left on the planet, but I'm scared for my own life and future, and I'm absolutely terrified for that of my son, and you should be too.
A safer future is still possible, but it requires urgency, coordination, and sustained investment.
But there is also good opportunity. If we do treat this as the security challenge it is, the solutions make us stronger.
total breakdown in society.
Be afraid.
Be afraid.
Very afraid. We, the government, will protect you.
Yes.
It's becoming pretty obvious.
And actually, there's good opportunity there as well, probably to make quite a bit of money as well. But it's about increasing the strength of the state, the centre. One of the things that jumped out at me, particularly from that, was the idea that these European-style mega floods might happen here, and there's a real possibility of that. Are those the floods like the ones in Valencia, where the EU went around removing flood barriers? 130 or something like that in the preceding 5 or 10 years.
Or the Environment Agency not cleaning out the reeds in Somerset levels and flooding resulting. It's same policy then.
Exactly. So that was the National Emergency Briefing. It was led out, as I reported back in December, by Chris Packham, CBE, so coming right from the top level of the British Imperial Administration. Heavy INGSOC vibes, feels very, very 1984. And this was for the benefit of MPs and Lords. But they really want to go after the mass population now. So just last week, they've introduced this parliamentary call for a televised emergency briefing, right? So as members of parliament and peers, we have a responsibility to ensure the public is well informed about risks facing the nation. The scientific evidence is clear that climate change and nature loss present a rising threat to the UK's food security, health, infrastructure, economy and national security. These are all the policy agenda items that Charles just talked about. These risks are already affecting communities across the country and will only grow in the years ahead. We need a prime-time televised emergency briefing across all of the main channels.
In order to drill this into people's heads.
Terrify the population.
Yeah.
Absolute psychological abuse and, frankly, torture going on here. That's what they're trying to tee up. As I'll just remind people, I'll put a link to the previous report. A lot of the coverage from the emergency briefing back at the end of November did feature Zach Polanski. I've said that I think that he's the chosen candidate for the British establishment. I absolutely stand by that. I think he's been selected. I think he's been chosen. They literally said in the video they put great people out there and then had him centre frame. It's not exactly subtle, and this is just part of the propaganda push. But then behind the scenes, we've got a whole bunch of organisations that are building the capability for whole of society action. So this is public, private and social sector coming together to act in a coordinated fashion and to deliver what they call resilience, right? So there are these terms that are coming out now. Resilience is absolutely one of them. Preparedness is another. I'll just draw your attention to two organisations in this area that we'll come back to more over the coming weeks, I'm sure. So this is the National Preparedness Commission. This was established in 2020, part of the COVID response, and it exists to promote better preparedness for a major crisis or incident. Heaven forbid that something like that should happen. Certainly, not constructed by our own government. And this is a public-private set up, so it's sponsored by Google and Amazon and a bunch of other big corporations.
British Red Cross, that's an interesting one.
Right, so there's a load of charities in there. So these are the networks. They got access to all of the integrated capabilities of the British establishment ultimately, and it's chaired by this guy, Lord Harris of Haringey, who was made a life peer in June 98 by Tony Blair. He's been the chair of the Labour Peers since 2012. He was chair of the Fabian Society at Cambridge University before becoming president of the Cambridge Union, and then after university he was national chair of the Young Fabians and also served on the executive of the Fabian Society. So this is Fabian operation to deliver preparedness and resilience.
So this is the power through politics, alongside and through politics.
Yeah, politics, corporations, they love working with big companies because, well, just one example, during COVID, if you want to put signage up in all of the shops around the country, it's much easier for you to do that if you can ring up Sainsbury's and Tesco and Waitrose, and you've got about 5 or 10 phone calls that you need to make, and then you can push your message everywhere, get your policy distributed. If you've got loads of small independent people, then they might say no, and we couldn't have that. Just one more example. Again, I'll come back to this in more detail over the coming weeks, but this jumped out at me. The UK Resilience Academy, and this was formerly the Emergency Planning College. And interestingly enough, for a UK government entity, this is operated by Serco, which is a FTSE-listed corporation, significantly controlled by the royal family. This is sort of East India Company-style governance that we all have to pay for, and actually is corporatism, which is part of the technical definition of fascism. So this is what's currently in place in the UK right now.
Indeed. Ben, thank you very much for that excellent overview. And to say to the audience that what you are getting through the UK column reports, not only today, but every UK column news, is the detailed information about where these policies are coming from, what they look like, what they sound like, and most importantly, who are the people creating it. And unless we understand how this attack is being formed on people, it's impossible to deal with it. So if you're thinking, my goodness, how do we push back about what's happening? The first thing is we all have to understand what's being done. We have to see it, we have to hear it, and then we are in a position to warn other people. And when enough people understand what's happening, that is when this thing starts to actually fall over. So it's beholden on all of us, the UK column reporting, but also our audience, to get the information across and spread as widely as possible. Now, if you would like to support the UK column and you're not already doing so, then do visit our website, press the click here button, and that will bring up details of support. You can take out a monthly membership with us or an annual, you can donate, or you can take out a lifetime membership. And I want to say, particularly today, with this very important news, that it's been the tremendous support of our audience over 20 years, which has now brought UK column to a position where we can start to really up our game and expand not only the type of reporting, but where we are able to report from. So a huge thank you to everybody that supported UK column and our members, because we couldn't have done it without you. Now, Diane has reminded me that there's a huge amount of written material gone up on the UK column website. Many people don't visit the website. They don't look at the really excellent articles that are constantly posted every week. So just as a reminder, we've got the blindfold briefing here, Perverse Verdicts, which is Charles Malet having a look at the law, common law, and what's been happening around the jury system. We've got Farmers, Mercosur, and global governance. This is really having a look at what the French farmers have been up against and how they are trying to fight back. We've got a very interesting geopolitical article having a look at the position of Greenland in respect of NATO and asking the question, is Greenland soon to be America's 51st state? Well, we'll wait to see what happens on that. We've also got Lest We Forget Part 4, Through the Eyes of the Educators. And this is a very poignant piece. It's looking at the damage done to children under the COVID lockdown system. And in the article, it's got quotes not only from educators and people working in schools, but people also responsible for counselling vulnerable children. And you can read their horror at the damage done to children during the lockdown period. Yet another attack from the British government on its own people. And we've also got this one here having a look at the relationship between Venezuela, Davos, and what we see coming in the New World Order. So please, if you haven't been reading what's on the UK column, go and have a look. A wealth of material. And again, I'm going to say it's not there because of the UK column team. It's there because of the fantastic support from our audience over a great many years. Now, tonight at 7 p.m, We've got Germ Warfare, Charlie Robinson on understanding propaganda wars, very pertinent with regard to today's UK column news. And also, we're just in Extra going to be having a little preview of a telephone call I had with Mike from Slough, and that's on the subject of the sardine saga. So if you're curious as to what that is, join us for UK column Extra at the end of the news. Now, this brings us back to Mike Robinson, and Mike has also got a report which he's produced. I'm going to say the team has been working extremely hard. They've had very long flights, and they have still been able to produce material for today's news. So we're very grateful for that. Let's have a listen to what Mike Robinson had to say on the subject of digital ID.
In the middle of last month, David Davis, MP, of course, most recognised for championing privacy issues, I suppose, wrote to 17 government departments asking them how much they plan to reduce their department's budget to help fund the digital ID scheme. Now, most of the responses he received were basically templated, it looked like. Costs in this spending review period will be met within the existing spending review settlements, is what it said. Except for one response, and that came from the Home Office and Mike Tapp, who said the Cabinet Office, in collaboration with the Home Office and other government departments, is currently in the process of working through the policy and design decisions that will underpin the digital ID. While this activity is underway, it's not currently possible to finalise cost estimations and the impact these will have on the Home Office budget. So that was his position. In other words, it remains to be seen whether or not costs will be met within the existing spending review settlements, which is what the templated answer seemed to say. But if we go back to November last year and the Office for Budget Responsibility, in their response to the budget, they forecast what they described as the unfunded cost of digital ID cards at a provisional annual cost of £0.6 billion. That means £1.8 billion over the next 3 years. Since they've already said that digital ID is to be designed, built and run by government, in-house government teams and not by outsourcing to private companies, probably that price is going to go up somewhat. Now, if you remember a number of years ago when the original design for digital ID was released by the Tory government of the day, this was what it was looking like. Basically a wallet is how they were describing it, and the wallet would be held and securely on your device, your phone, and it would store attributes. This is what they called trusted pieces of information about yourself. So all these claims suggesting that nothing is happening until it happens, that they're waiting for consultations to take place, that this is something that's all in the future. They're continuing to press ahead regardless under the surface. And remember, this design was what the previous Tory government had in mind. Obviously, the Starmer regime, all change, and so everything changes, except it doesn't change, because here we go. This is exactly what they're going to roll out. They have had this gov.uk wallet in beta test since the middle of last year. It's about to go live in the not too distant future. And they've told us that the first thing that we can do is to get a digital version of our driving license. So Brits will be given the option to use a digital version of their driver's license from their phone to easily prove their age when buying age-restricted items online and in person, as well as proving their right to drive. So they talk about this digital driving license, and then it's and as well as.
It's all the same theme, and it's so important because this is the massive attack on the UK population unfolding, all fear-based, but all around for the state knowing everything about us through the digital ID system. The state will know everything about you because that is the way the ultimate control can come in. Let's see the second part of Mike's clip.
No mention of age-restricted content on there. And the question is, will the decision by the House of Lords to amend the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill to ban social media to under 16s drive demand for digital ID? Well, the answer to that is probably yes, at least if this is any indication, with Ireland pushing digital ID verified social media access in the EU. Clearly, no more anonymous internet use is a very key agenda item coming up in the not too distant future. But as the Register reported last week, fewer than 1% of eligible veterans have applied for the digital version of their Veterans ID card here in the UK since its launch in October. So the question is, do the adults in the room just not see the benefits? The aim here is clearly to use children once again to drive an unpopular policy. By the way, Canada has joined the growing list of countries banning children from social media, apparently, or at least they're heading in that direction. They've announced they're heading in that direction at the moment. Now, just looking internationally then to see what the lie of the land is, more and more companies joining the fray. To name but one, this is Xeon. They describe themselves as the command center for real-time fraud prevention. And they announced the launch of an AI-powered identity verification solution. So that is yet another country joining the fray. But in terms of national policies, then let's just have a look around the world a little bit. We have Pakistan has just announced it's enabled facial recognition-based biometric verification via the Pak ID app, which they say allows citizens to obtain digital verification certificates. In Hong Kong, the Digital Policy Office has reported that their I Am Smart digital identity platform is now being used by over 4 million people and provides access, they say, to 1,300 public services. Brazil, their federal police has confirmed that airlines from the end of January must validate every departing passenger's QR code identity on the gov.br platform before issuing a boarding pass. And in Malaysia, in fact, since mid-January, the Malaysian Ministry of Home Affairs is using My Digital ID as a single login system for Malaysian citizens. This does not apply to foreigners, just to citizens accessing the My NICE or maybe it's pronounced My Nice, I'm not sure, mobile application. Now, My Nice is Malaysia's new AI-powered digital platform, which they claim aims to enhance border security and streamline immigration services using facial recognition and QR code clearance for faster traveller processing. So this is for absolutely the same policy as Brazil, so undoubtedly we'll start seeing this being rolled out to other countries as well. So that's where we're at with a quick roundup of the digital ID situation in the UK and abroad. This is clearly a topic that isn't going to go away anytime soon.
Well, Mike absolutely said it there. It isn't going to go away because these are the government's priorities. So you drive in UK at the moment, the roads dangerous with potholes. The flooding is not under control. It's not supposed to be, because the policies that we've taken our audience through in UK Column News today, these are the ones that the government wants to enforce because this is part of the globalist agenda. Now, let's focus in again on Keir Starmer. Should we trust Keir Starmer? Personally, I don't think so, but let's have a little look at Full Fact from June 2020. Here's the headline. Keir Starmer led the CPS when it did not charge Jimmy Savile, but he wasn't the reviewing lawyer. Mr. Starmer was head of the CPS when the decision was made not to prosecute Savile, but he was not the reviewing lawyer for the case. An official investigation commissioned later by Starmer criticised both prosecutors and police for their handling of the allegations. Well, what a position to be in. So really, Full Fact there clears Keir Starmer and rubber stamps the official narrative. Nothing to see. Nobody knew that Jimmy Savile was doing what he was doing. And of course, this is exactly the same line with Epstein. If we focus back in on Full Fact, though, it's moving into some pretty interesting territory. So let's have a look at the CEO, a gentleman called Chris Morris. And he said recently that Full Fact is delighted to announce the appointment of Sally Walker as the charity's new chair. Sally's a former senior GCHQ leader and led the creation of the UK's National Cyber Force. She now works with organisations on navigating rapid technological change and disruption. So we're controlling the truth narrative with people whose agenda is clearly to break the country down. That's the way it would appear to many people, or the man on the Clapham omnibus, certainly. So as can we look at this a bit deeper? Well, if we have a look at Chris Morris himself, he said that he's chief executive of the UK's independent, well, roughly, fact-checking charity. Bad information promotes hate, it damages people's health, and it hurts democracy, and we fight against it in different ways. I was a senior BBC correspondent for 3 decades, and of course the BBC squeaky clean. So this is the lady. She said, "It's clear to me that full facts work is more essential than ever, and I'm excited to help the organisation with the next phase of their strategic growth and impact." It sounds like a global corporation instead of some news-checking organisation. And we'll just end with a little video clip of Sally talking about her expertise.
I'm Sally Walker. I was a government official for 25 years in national security, and now I'm on the board of With You With Me. Being a woman in cyber and having a leadership responsibility has been an absolute privilege. Ironically, because people focus on the tech, it's all been about the people. It's about the teams that I've worked with, the places I've been, the experiences I've had. And as I look back over a career of 25 years, almost all of it has been absolutely brilliant. The cyber workforce is changing. It's more diverse, both in terms of the society it represents, but mostly in terms of cognitive diversity, different people thinking differently about the modern problems, the complexity of the world that we live in.
So I'm going to suggest a pretty woke agenda there, coming into how we establish fact and truth and connections, presumably back to her old organisations. But let's just end by what Full Fact had to say about this lady. And it said that over the course of her career, Sally has advised UK and US governments on cyber policy, data integrity, and international information threats. She's provided regular commentary and analysis to media on AI and misinformation, and designed training for companies on AI readiness and ethical leadership. So Full Fact, independent, moving forward. It's going to grow, the truth empire, but don't worry, because it's all under ethical leadership. Are you reassured, Ben?
Oh, yes. It's great to have someone who understands guardrails and resilience.
It can keep us safe.
And absolutely, yes. From those alternative facts on the internet. Crazy. I'm sure we'll be talking about her much more over the coming months. Right, shall we?
So I think we should.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up, I think. Maybe we've got something after this, I'm not sure. We'll see how I do for time. But I'm going to talk about policy profession. God, that sounds exciting, doesn't it? This is how the civil service has been captured. We're going to have a glimpse into how sausages are made in the back end of the British government. And let's have a little look at some of the characters involved. There's some funky visuals from their website, Policy Profession, set up about 10 years ago, and it's there to build capability and develop the right skills for policy professionals across the civil service. Policy meaning plan of action. So what we're going to do, these are the people who actually decide what we're going to do inside government. You thought it was politicians who you voted for. Oh, no. It's these people and the organisation and the people who work within this organisation, including this lady up until recently. So this is Dame Tamara Finkelstein. She was head of government policy profession until a few months ago. She's senior sponsor of the Civil Service Jewish Network. She was permanent secretary at DEFRA from 2019 to 2025. So Charles was talking earlier about some of the terror messaging coming out of DEFRA. This is an organisation that Dame Tamara used to be in charge of, and you can see her here speaking at a joint event between Policy Profession and Institute for Government, who Brian's been talking about loads recently, which is funded by Lord Sainsbury, and they're rewiring the British state at the moment. And this is one of those overlap points where you have civil service organisation like Policy Profession and the Institute for Government. And then also, if we can get that image back up on screen, you've got Paddy Vallance over there on the left-hand side of the stage, who, when this image was taken, was working as an advisor to the Blair Foundation, amongst others. Mike used an interesting comment in his report a moment ago. It's all change, apart from there isn't any change. And the reason for that, apart from the fact that all the politicians work for the same people, because if you look inside the civil service, this is what you get, right? So here we have Lord Case on the left, who was the former cabinet secretary, head of the civil service, appointed by Boris, who left that position at the end of last year and was replaced by the chap on the right-hand side there. That's Sir Chris Wormold, who at the time this image was taken a couple of years ago was Permanent Secretary of the Department of Health. So he oversaw UK government delivery and policy through the COVID era. And this is why nothing changes, because actually behind the scenes it's these people who are doing everything. They'll do the top job. And then Simon Case, he's got shunted off to the Lords. Chris Wormold comes into position. No doubt he'll probably end up going to the Lords at some point in the not too distant future. And the whole thing just trundles along. That image was taken at Civil Service Live, their fantastic, exciting live event, which, interestingly enough, was sponsored by Accenture, who are a World Economic Forum strategic partner.
All a coincidence, Ben.
Well, yeah, I'm sure there's no quid pro quo that goes on there at all. This is all completely above board, not making any kind of suggestions at all that anything improper is happening here. I just think it's interesting that you've got a massive international technology and management consulting firm that just happens to deliver tens, potentially hundreds of millions of pounds a year in UK government contracts, sponsoring the civil service event. Do you not think they could just do the event without any sponsorship?
Well, apparently we can't anymore, because obviously the corporates are locked into the government system. This is how Bill Gates can walk in and out of Downing Street.
Yes, absolutely. But they're not just locked in by the corporates, they're also ideologically captured. So we can see here, centre left on this image is Sir Geoff Mulgan, the former editor of Marxism Today, the founder of Demos, who also shared an office with Common Purpose, tight friends with Julian Middleton from back in the mid-90s, with a bunch of other dignitaries at that event. Also, you've got the Behavioural Insights team in the mix. So here's David Halpern at an event at King's College in London, which is designed to target and recruit students coming out of King's College into the civil service to become policy professionals. Halpern there, the man who came up with the nudge unit and the Mindspace document that we talk about all the time on UK Column, which has absolutely infected every single area of the UK government. I think there's over nearly 100 nudge units all around the UK government, not just in central, but out in the regions as well. Halpern was the man who instigated that process at the behest of David Cameron. Before that, he was working for Tony Blair. Again, you can see here, Labour, Tory, doesn't make any difference. These are the people actually calling the shots behind the scenes. Also very closely linked into the London School of Economics. And you can see here Dame Tamara with Sir Anthony Seldon at the 10th anniversary of the, the Executive Masters in Public Policy. This is the 10th anniversary of that, which is actually offered to members of policy profession. So actually people in the civil service get promoted to go to the LSE. The LSE obviously was founded by the Fabian Society. So this is the kind of milieu that these people are circulating within. And Anthony Seldon's an interesting chap. Let's have a little listen to this clip of him talking, which was distributed through one of the policy profession social media channels.
My name is Anthony Seldon, and I have such a fun job. I write books about prime ministers, 8 so far. I'm writing Sunak at 10 at the moment, and then I'm going to write Starmer at 10. Now, here's my provocation. If all those prime ministers came into Downing Street on their first day and their first question was, what will history say about me? What even will Anthony Seldon say about me? Then they will be much better prime ministers by thinking in time, thinking historically. Now, how can you help them be the best they can be? How can everyone in their own departments be the best that they can be? Find out more, come and hear me at the Policy Festival. Look forward to seeing you.
Well, astonishing, Ben. I don't have. There's not much good I can say about any of the prime ministers that we've had in very. Well, I was going to say recent years, but in fact, it's
any of our lifetimes,
many years. But for him to say that they'll be better if they pay attention to Sir Anthony Seldon, I reckon is just beyond the pale.
Yes.
But he talks about holding them to account, and that's a key thing, because if the millions of people in UK stood up to hold their Prime Minister to account, things would change very quickly.
Absolutely, yes. What will Anthony Seldon say about me? What an arrogant thing to say, Sir Anthony. I hope you won't mind me pointing that out. So what's this all about? So, I mean, the LSE and King's College, it's all about scooping up the bright young things from university and letting them loose in the corridors of power once they have been fully indoctrinated in the policy profession standards. There they are in a meeting room at one of these convenings that they have.
Technique, controlled meeting.
Absolutely. Well, they're kind of being lectured to here, right? And what are they learning about? They're learning about this, and these are the policy profession standards. By the way, it's amazing what you can find lying around on the internet. I mean, these are the inner workings of the civil service, basically, and you can just go and provide links. You can go and look at these and download them and read them yourself. But just a few little clips from this. So the policy profession standards are a competency framework for all UK civil servants involved in policy work and operating in a policy-making environment. Again, policy is what we're going to do next. These are the people coming up with that. The standards framework describes the essential features of policy practice in any administration. Yeah, it doesn't matter who's in power. This is how we create policy in any administration. They've been redesigned recently, been updated in the last 12 months, and this marks the first time the policy profession will have a common capability framework right across the civil service with shared expectations in every nation. So this is about standardisation onto a single operational platform across the whole civil service, from top to bottom, left to right, England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales. This framework for policy practice, what policy is and what skills it involves, is also useful throughout the public sector, where we continue to build partnerships across public services and tiers of government, breaking down barriers between different parts of government, different departments, in order to make it easier to implement single policies. Let's just have a quick look at some of the detail here. So they've got a process that they go through from strategy to democracy to delivery. And the few things that jumped out at me, first one is this idea of participation and engagement. So there's loads of discussion about this at the moment. That is basically deliberative processes. So they're embedding that into the policy development process. Working internationally. Why does the UK civil service need to operate internationally? It doesn't. Does it?
It does if your agenda is to create a globalist system. You lock each country's civil service into another one. This is what the partnership arrangement's about. This is what the memorandum of understanding with Israel, for example, this is what they're designed to do, is lock countries together.
Yep, absolutely. If we can get that back on screen quickly, we can see the need for multi-level government. So this idea that there's separation between different parts of government, devolution, for example. It's not devolution, it's actually integration. And then commercial on the right-hand side. So a lot of this is about buying services from outside providers and development of these public-private marketplaces, which is a lot of what we talk about here on the column. How is this being enabled? Again, amazing. They just put this stuff online. You can just go and grab this. We'll provide links to where this stuff was stored. They need infrastructure, so access to data, a lab in each department, policy lab in each department. It's going to be funded centrally. There's a need for leadership and an awareness of what's going on across all the different component parts of the system. They use this term boundary spanning, you can see there, which is about better integration with all government functions. And for me, that's breaking down silos, leading beyond authorities. Is all absolutely common purpose principles. And then they want to make sure that this is embedded and understood across the whole of government, as we've already touched on. And what's driving this? Where's it coming from? What's going on behind the scenes? Well, funnily enough, this picture was taken in 2023. And you can see in the back there, David Cameron.
big society.
And the big society, not big government.
Which many people believed was just a flash in the pan because it was put into a brochure by the Tory party. It circulated for a few months and then it disappeared. And of course, later Cameron left politics. Well, he didn't. He was in politics, but working through charities. Big society was a big plan. It never went away.
Yep.
And this is why we can now see it pinned to the wall of this particular meeting.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Incredible.
Again, all change apart from no change.
Indeed. We must bring you today's UK column news to a close. We have had an extended news because we think there's so much that is important that's going on. Most of our news today focused on the attack coming from within UK itself. And until people see this and recognise it, it's impossible to deal with it. So you've been given the information today in the news, the sources, the images, the documents. Spread the word with other people, warn them that they're under attack, and that attack is coming from within our own governmental system on the people of this country. And I want to end today's news by a huge thank you to somebody that pointed out that every time there's an attempt to attack people, to break people apart, they're normally drawn into groups, black and white, Christian, Muslim, immigrants, indigenous people. It's always a label. And it appears that the latest attack is on free media itself by labeling people as being in particular camps. I think this is a dangerous precedent because we all need to be working together. That is the only way we can stand up against such a powerful global system. But we will be reporting further on what's now stirring the free media pot to create angst and fear and suspicion amongst many good people who are trying to get good, accurate counter news out. We'll end there. If you're a member of UK Column, stay with us because we'll have UK Column Extra in a few moments. But for our wider audience in UK and overseas, a huge thank you for your support. And UK Column News will be back at 1 o'clock on Friday. See you then. Bye-bye.